Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. Dutch politics have taken a dramatic turn in recent weeks, with a pro-farmers party making big gains in provincial elections and demanding that the government review its policy on nitrogen emissions. A reduction in those emissions are required by EU rules. But any concession to farmers means alienating the Green Left Party, which submitted a no-confidence motion in the government earlier this week. That motion was supported by most of the opposition parties. The government survived that vote, but big questions remain about the nitrogen emissions policy and indeed over how long Prime Minister Mark Rutte's coalition can last in such circumstances. All of this as the Netherlands prepare to host the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, on a state visit on April the 11th and 12th, and to come up with joint solutions to some of Europe's biggest challenges. Well, for this episode, I'm very pleased to welcome the country's Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister, Sigrid Kaag. She was previously Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister for Foreign Trade. Before joining the government in 2017, she had a distinguished career with the United Nations, which included a stint as UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon. She joins me from The Hague. Sigrid Kaag, thank you so much for being my guest. So let's start with this political turmoil in your country. Is the government a lame duck now after this no-confidence vote? Is an election all but inevitable sometime later this year?
Well, that's a near impossible question, of course, to ask of me, as the representative of the second largest party in this government. Yeah. I should hope not. I think we've certainly had a slap on the wrist, as they say, a stark reminder of our need to do better, to be more convincing. And at the same time, there's a real issue in our country, which is the nitrogen crisis. If we do not solve it and tackle it appropriately and aligned with what are the rules and legislation, the economy will become stuck. Farmers will not have the prospects into a sort of a sustainable future way of life and farming to which they are entitled. We can't build roads in the same way we would like to, and overall nature will be impacted and it will not be restored in the way we ought to. So it is a real issue.
And you've underlined that the coalition has a deal on the nitrogen issue and you don't want the coalition to change that coalition agreement. If it does do that, are you prepared to walk away from the government? Because you've been very clear that you want to keep the policy in place as it is.
Well, the policy didn't come out of thin air, and it was not driven by ideology or political preference. The policy was underwritten and based on science and a sense of urgency to tackle basically what has been an outcome of years of either denial or looking away. So we owe it to all citizens, including the farmers, but we owe it to all to tackle this in an appropriate and an inclusive manner. What we've said from the outset, when I speak now as the representative or the leader of my party, Democrat 66, we want to do the job right, or there's no point to doing it at all. And for us, the essential basis of joining this government was the foundations of the coalition agreement. Now, politics is also the art of compromise, but we also need to be very mindful of the art of doing what's right, as well as the quality of the compromise.
Okay, we'll have to watch that space. Well, as I mentioned, President Macron will be visiting the Netherlands on the 11th and 12th of this month, and on the agenda, strengthening the existing scientific, economic and cultural cooperation between the two countries. Khadija Hajab went to see one area where pooled European resources could have a major impact.
It sounds like science fiction, but quantum technology is very much a reality at this research center. House of Quantum in the Netherlands is a startup incubator at the cutting edge in the field. For instance, QBird is leading efforts to provide secure solutions for future quantum internet.
So very basic quantum physics, quantum science explains the world of the smallest particles. So think about electrons, atoms, photons, single particles of light.
This enterprise will be receiving 2.7 million euros from the EU over the next 3 years and will see its team grow from 5 to 9 researchers. In the coming years, many hope quantum technology could create a massive tech paradigm shift From synthesizing new medicine to solving crucial matters such as transportation, quantum science predicted impact has the potential to forever transform the world as we know it. Engineering students in TU Delft have been working on a voluntary basis since 2018 to design an emission-free aircraft.
We hope to be the first to fly with liquid hydrogen by 2025.
Since 2021, French and Dutch scientists have joined forces to get ahead in the quantum race. Over the past 6 years, the EU has funded quantum research with 175 million euros in order to play a more important role in the sector.
We have a fantastic starting point in quantum, but if there is a quantum economy out there in the future, Europe has a very, very good chance of being one of the main players worldwide.
Europe faces a massive challenge in its bid to keep up in the quantum race: the brain drain. In a field dominated by multinationals such as IBM, Google, Microsoft, or more generally the USA,
when you look at, for instance, research and development, I think they invest like 40% more than we do in Europe. I think companies in the United States invest like 6 times more in artificial intelligence than we do in Europe. I mean, it's not only the United States, also Asia. We are not in a position that we can have a layback attitude.
For Europe, faced with competition from the United States and Asia, its success for the future will depend on its investment today.
So, Sigrid, Kaag, as we saw in that report, quantum technology is one of the technological hopes of the future. It's the kind of thing that the US spends on heavily. So how do you make Europe more competitive then? Does that need a major revamp in research and development budgets across the EU?
Well, certainly, I think we are all very mindful of the fact that we need to leapfrog, we need to stay ahead of the game. There are a number of initiatives launched by the European Commission. I see value in the right investments, in targeting both the investments in technology that actually also have a tie to building future businesses. You may recall that a very prominent world leader in microchips, ASML, is actually an offspring of Philips at the time. So many of the new startups can actually be front runners in the future. And as Europe, we need to do significantly better if we want to stay ahead of the game and also provide for the economies of the future. It's also in our geopolitical interest to do so.
So this kind of investment, would it be helpful to have a sovereignty fund in order to provide some sort of joint financing for such projects?
Well, that's of course one of the multi-billion-dollar questions. You know that we are quite reticent on the launch of new funds. We sometimes find that once we analyze a problem or we underscore a dilemma, the immediate knee-jerk reaction is to establish a fund. We find that the proper way of doing it, going about it, is to assess the problem, find pathways to solutions, leverage the funds that we have, very often repurpose or use existing funds. If there is a shortfall, one needs to debate it. But in the Netherlands, we say money doesn't grow on trees, and we certainly need to be very mindful in times of economic uncertainty how we spend and to which purposes. But we're more reticent than some other countries. I have to acknowledge that.
And to repurpose existing funds, I assume you're talking about the recovery and resilience packages, in other words, the COVID pandemic recovery plans that have been approved for the EU's member states. How should that money be better used? Does there have to even be some sort of European mechanism to channel this money better, or would you just leave it to individual states to say, we're going to spend some of this money on, for example, quantum technology or something else as they see fit?
Well, no, I think the latter can't be the case, given the fact that we've all agreed to these types of funds to be used against specific purposes, and they've been benchmarked. There's a conditionality attached to them, and the Netherlands was a front runner in the previous government to ensure that we were all clear as to what it would be spent against, that we can demonstrate progress and results. So I think we need to have a conversation. Recently, I have not seen yet a proposal by the Commission that would put forward a sovereign fund. So we need to be, we're also waiting if that were to be the case. Equally so, you need to be very clear towards taxpayers and towards ourselves as member states. If we have funds, How do we spend them? What are the expected results? And could we do it in a different way? National governments, of course, also have a role to play in ensuring the right investments, particularly in the field of research and development, because it benefits all of us.
And just back to this upcoming visit, briefly, by President Macron. You know, of course, that he wants to have a discussion on the strategic role of nuclear energy in the EU. Your country, however, is putting a lot of emphasis on renewables, especially wind and tidal energy. So are you and the French government in very different places when it comes to this nuclear issue?
I wouldn't say so, not from a fundamental perspective. You may recall that in the current government agreement, we've actually decided for the first time in a long time to free up the space for investments into the establishment and development of nuclear reactors. And that is quite a novel decision if you look at past political trajectory in the Netherlands. France, of course, has a tremendous history and has huge nuclear assets. So I think the conversation looking towards the future should look at the energy mix that we need. We need wind at sea, solar, and nuclear should not necessarily be excluded, but it's a national choice. And I think the collaboration there can be a very important one. Ultimately, we're keen and very supportive of Fit for 55. At national levels, governments can still decide in order to decide how they want to secure energy independence. Certainly, we've managed at a breakneck speed our independence from Russian gas and oil, and now we need to secure a future which is mindful of energy security as well as the affordability of energy.
Getting that energy mix right, obviously, is going to be the subject of many negotiations going forward. Sigrid Kaag, the Netherlands Minister of Finance and Deputy Prime Minister, thank you so much for being my guest on Talking Europe. And we'll be back in a few minutes for part 2, so do stay with us.